Okay, hi. So I'm going to pass over to Brett to immediately introduce himself. So, hi, Brett. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for having me on, mate. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
When you give me a bit about your background, tell the listeners about where you are in life and how you got here.
God, this is a long one. Okay, so I'm 42 now. I'm married. I've got two kids, Gus and Jude, identical twin boys. I live with my wife Jess, and we live in Hoddesdon in Hertfordshire. In terms of me personally, I grew up in the UK in Essex. Which is I grew up in a town called Harlow, which is a working class town, bit of a rough area. I was okay at school, pretty average student. I wasn't particularly naughty, but I wasn't particularly academically gifted at it either. Um, Went on to study at university and did sport development, and from there, that's when I started to sort of get into fitness as a career. I opened my first gym when I was early 20s. I couldn't exactly tell you how old I was, but I wasn't very old. Essentially, like this gym I was working in was going bust. Um, and the opportunity came to take it over. So I took it over. I didn't really want to take it over, actually. It was almost like my parents suggested that I do it. I was a bit skeptical about it and a bit scared probably back then. But I took it on and grew it into a pretty successful personal training studio. I then went on to open two other gyms. I had stakes in two other gyms with other partners. And then in 2016 or 2015, sorry, my wife, we got married and my wife fell pregnant. And it was identical twin boys. So it was like, oh, brilliant. Fantastic. We've got twins. Wonderful. We soon realised that they had a thing called twin to twin transfusion syndrome, which essentially is when identical twins, one of the twins is kind of like essentially taking the food of the other one. So it's a really, really serious condition. And in the UK, we're kind of like we're the leading sort of people on this. Apparently, I didn't know that until we had the condition. But we went to see like the godfather of I don't know what they call him, the godfather of prenatal medicine or something. This guy in King's in London, and luckily through the NHS, they put us onto the NHS, so we got sort of fast tracked. Had the operation, but essentially just meant that me and my wife were pretty much living out of hospitals for 9 months, or the best part of 9 months. We were just always all over the shop. Um, she had to be under like constant supervision because they were scared to lose a baby. They actually did laser surgery into the what do you call it, the sac or whatever, where the babies are. So like cutting edge procedure stuff. Like I remember when it happened, there were like 10 people in the room watching at the same time. All these students and all these other people taking notes and stuff because it really was like cutting edge stuff. Um, and we were like, not weirdly, but luckily we managed to save both boys. I think at one stage they gave us a 33% chance of keeping them both, a 33% chance of losing one, and a 33% chance of them both surviving or both going. So it was really, really, really stressful time, as you can imagine. Um, Got through that. Fantastic. The boys were born. Obviously, you got twins, and having kids is hard anyway, right? Having babies is hard. When you've got two, it's just I would say probably just a little bit harder because you've got two to manage as well. Um, so that was difficult. And then obviously we had a pretty early diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. So we knew that the boys, you kind of know sometimes when the kids aren't right, and you try, maybe you sometimes try and ignore it, or maybe you sometimes try and kind of think, oh, well, maybe it's just X, Y, Z, or maybe they're just developing a little slow. But I think in our heart of hearts, we both knew that something wasn't quite right. So we got a very early diagnosis. They were diagnosed, I think, before they were 3, which is very, very early um, in autism diagnosis. So the boys are non-verbal. They have what they call global development delay as well. So they're a little bit slower to pick up general skills. You wouldn't think that now. They're doing really well. We managed to get them into a special school, but obviously that came with a lot of stress, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on.
Mm.
And essentially during that period, I had to change my whole work, career, everything. I stopped working in fitness completely because, back then, really, in that kind of time, most fitness stuff was sort of hands on stuff. It was done within the gym setting. So, obviously, I was essentially managing facilities. I was, working with clients and groups, clients one on one. I was running a fight school at the time as well with some of my business partners, and I had stakes and other little, bits and pieces all over, and I had to essentially sell up, and I sold up for probably not what it was worth. But it was what it was. I had, I couldn't commit the time or the energy, and my business partners, while they were supportive, they were getting frustrated, and I understand it because, I
Mm.
just wasn't pulling my weight. Um, so I took over my father's business. He was coming up to retirement essentially, and he had quite a few health problems as well. He ran a gardening company. I grew that into a facilities management company. So we started doing various other bits and pieces. And earlier this year, I've stepped away from that as well, and I've gone full time back into the fitness industry because that's where my passion was. That's what I enjoyed doing, and I really, I'd grown other businesses as well alongside that business. I'd grown a small security company. I'd grown a small a relocation company, but the relocation company went to absolutely nothing because of COVID. I'd kind of built this really quite a big lucrative business, and I'd shoestringed it as well. So we I didn't really owe any money on it as such, but then COVID came along, just completely sideswiped everything. Um, Ending up with like me taking the NHS in the UK to court over a contractual dispute, or certainly threatening to. Um, so that was an absolute nightmare, a very stressful time. All while going on through a process of diagnosing your kids with autism and all the things that come along with that, and all the other
Mm.
worries and all the other stresses that go alongside that. So I've had a pretty rough couple of last 7 years, I'd say, and a big sort of professional transition, and a big mindset transition that period as well. Um, Obviously been through some therapy for that as well, because I was diagnosed with PTSD essentially, which was interesting because I always thought PTSD was something that soldiers got. Right, I got pals that have served and done tours of Afghan that have, in my head at the time, like they've actually got PTSD. I don't know what I've got, but it can't be PTSD, right? But then the more you understand about actually what PTSD is, and the more you understand about your own mental health, you start to realize, oh, okay, all right, fair enough. Then you know,
Mm.
it is basically just a trauma. So I've kind of been working on that and on myself over the last few years, and yeah, I come to this point now. So now I'm coaching other fathers of children with special needs, to help them kind of get their own fitness back, get their well-being back, and find strategies to overcome the overwhelm and the emotional exhaustion and all these other things that come along with being a dad of kids with special needs and autism and things like that, because it really does take a toll on you. And what they tend to do is tend to put themselves right at the back, and things like training, nutrition, self-care, um, time for themselves, all that stuff kind of gets put right to the bottom of their own priority list. And
Mm.
if you haven't got your own oxygen mask on first, things will quickly fall apart. So I work with other dads and other parents as well, just to help them overcome some of those sort of limiting beliefs and limiting behaviors, so they can basically just go on and regain their self-esteem, regain their confidence, and their physicality, but also just help them be a more present, better parent at the same time. Because
Mm.
I went through that process myself. I put all these things before myself, and the problem was is I had nothing for me, so I was a shell of who I used to be. But also I wasn't much good to the family either. While I was kind of going through the motions, I really wasn't present. I really wasn't in tune or feeling with what was going on, and it was massively affected my professional life. It massively affected some of my personal life, and some of my relationships I'd had with friends and family became a little bit more isolated, certainly from some of my pals, and struggled to communicate with people. And yeah,
Mm.
it got quite bad. And yeah, at that time I'd started a group. I'd started training with a couple of pals in the park, just doing some strength work. Um, and this kind of like thing called Strong Dad was born, where basically it was just like a load of blokes getting together in the park, doing some like strongman type training. And I always thought, oh, well,
Mm.
this is good because it's just mates training together, right? And then more and more people started joining, and pals would bring their mates, and then their mates would bring their mates, and before you know it, we've got like I was like, well, this is like a thing now. This is like this is a business. We need to structure this because we're getting more and more people coming in, more and people want to join, and I'm turning up on a Sunday when it used to be just me and a couple of mates, and now there's like 20 dads there, and it's like we need to structure this. We need to go out and buy a proper kit, buy a van, do all these other things. Um, and that's grown into a fitness franchise business. So we do invite women along to it as well now, because we just had more and more women wanting to come along. It was like, okay, fine, commercially you kind of had to open the doors up. But what we found with the Strong Dad thing was that while the guys enjoyed the training, what they really enjoyed was the ability to do something with other dads, and it became very much a almost like a counselling network. And these guys
Mm.
became friends, and they started to open up a little bit more, and they started to talk more openly and freely within those sessions. So it was kind of a vehicle for their own mental health, if you like, and their own kind of way to discuss some of the things that they were going through as dads, new dads, even older dads, um, general life. It might, it could have been about work, it could have been about other bits and pieces. And then you also started to see that within the group, other emergent leaders, so to speak. So other people would come to me and
Mm.
say, I just want to double check on, I don't know, Dave or whatever, because he definitely something's not quite right with him today, or he's a couple of sessions, he hasn't been for a while, and someone needs to touch base with him, check on him, and that sort of thing. It became a real good network for people. It became a real outlet for them.
Yeah.
And that's when I realised, actually, I suppose in some respects, in terms of there's a lot of talking groups for men, but I think what we're starting to realise now is that some men and some dads do better when they're doing. They tend to open up when they're doing. So one of the things someone said to me was like, women talk, men will do, in terms of
Mm.
their own therapy and their own talking therapies. So if you want a guy to kind of open up about what he's going through, or kind of loosen up about talking about his emotions or whatever he might be going through, then you kind of probably need to get him to do something. And then in that process, they begin to communicate, they begin to talk, they'll open up, and you'll kind of start to get to the heart of what really the problem is. Because
Mm.
that, everyone says it all the time, right? Like, oh, men don't talk, men don't talk, men don't talk. Now I get that, and that I'd probably say from my own personal experience that's true, but unless you've got the vehicle for them to talk, unless you've got the
Yeah.
vehicle for them to open up, what do you expect, right? It's like,
Mm.
yeah, we've got to keep these doors open, give some of these people space for them to do that type of thing, and then they will open up, and
Yeah.
that means that if it just means that their mental health's better, best case scenario, we've saved lives through what we've done. Worst case scenario, we've just helped people vent for an hour or so, which
Yeah.
keeps their relationships, keeps their own mindset a little bit more on track. So yeah, that's where I'm. Roundabout way, that's kind of where we're at the moment. That's what I'm up to this
I
point.
think it's incredibly admirable, and I know you're a humble guy, and you keep it humble, but it's very admirable. Everything you've been through is is extreme, I would say, in terms of the trauma, the difficulties, the challenges, however you want to phrase it. It's incredible what you've gone through, and it must have been extremely tough. I would say one thing that's interesting that you didn't mention, but it's interesting to me, is to also add in there. You're obviously, for those that are not watching the video, you're a big, strong guy. Like you're clearly not skimping on the weights yourself. And I know that you were doing MMA, which is mixed martial arts fight sport. and you did that professionally a while back. And just to step into a ring and fight someone like in a professional context, that is, the amount of training, perseverance, endurance, tough spirit, and overcoming one's fear. Because even if you're very confident about your fighting ability and you're very strong and you've trained a lot, it's still scary to get into a cage with someone and they're wanting to beat the crap out of you just as much as you are of them. And I would say also, though, the way in which you've gone from business, you've grown businesses and things, that takes a certain personality to accomplish all that and to see that perseverance. And I think it's very admirable that you clearly have that, and it's something I think is very special about you. But I was interested to know, like, where do you think all of that? You're going to just throw it at you. Where do you think all of that comes from? Is that something you've always felt like you've had, like a perseverance, or are you very competitive, or has it been something that you've kind of taken from other role models, or was it just you don't know? It just
Yeah,
came naturally to you.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I thought the other day, when I was kind of transitioning back and moving away from the other businesses that I'd had, I thought I was like, oh, maybe I need to write a CV, or I need to, like go and apply for a quotes job. And I was like, I've never actually had a job. I've never worked for anybody. I've always worked for myself, pretty much. Like, okay, I might have had a couple of little like Saturday jobs when I was a kid or whatever, but I've never worked in a big company. I've certainly never done the corporate thing. It's always been kind of carving out my own road, if you like. And I think that's more luck than
Mm,
judgment. Like, I'm not from a family of entrepreneurs or anything, not by any stretch of the imagination. Like,
mm,
it's just people doing what they do, right? I'm from a pretty working class background where it's kind of like, get a stable job, do your thing, get your head down, keep working hard, work hard, and everything will probably be all right. I think early on I realized that that wasn't the case, and that the kind of everything is changed now. And it was changing even back then when I started getting into the world of work with the rise of the internet and all these other bits and pieces and stuff. I just thought, I don't really, it just doesn't suit me, it doesn't fit me. In terms of the MMA, I suppose in some respects, um, I, that was kind of that. It was kind of grown out of fear that I realized one day that I was just quite fearful of everything and quite scared of. I don't like confrontation, weirdly. People find that quite funny about me. Like, I don't like confrontation. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. Really don't. I don't like. Don't particularly like fighting, for want of a better word, in terms of, verbal fighting. Or if you're in a restaurant
mm.
and there's a row or something, I'd be the guy going, oh God, don't. Like, food comes out cold and they're like, how is it? I'm like, yeah, it's fine, it's all right. My wife's like, no, it's rubbish, send it back. Oh God, don't. I'm that guy. I'm such a wimp when it comes to that sort of thing. So I kind of did it out of a facing the fear type thing. I realized in my early 20s I was quite fearful of a lot of things. So I sort of went back into martial, because I'd done a lot of martial arts as a kid. Went back into martial arts after university, where I'd kind of spent 3 years just getting a bit fat and just being generally a bit of a waste of space, really, if I'm honest. Complete wasted 3 years, really, in terms of, I mean, I got a degree out of it, but other than that, I didn't make the most of it because I was a bit too immature. I
Mm,
should have gone back
mm,
later. I should have had time out, but I didn't. Young, stupid, whatever. Um, and I came out and I thought, you know what, I'm scared of everything, so I'm going to get back into martial arts. I'm going to kind of go back into it, and I kind of had a natural affinity for it, and I enjoyed it, but it frightened me every time. Every time I remember, going into the gyms, going to new gyms, going to places where you were, you always start off being the nail. So you go to a new gym and, someone's a hammer and someone's a nail. And it's like, guess what? You're the nail. You're the guy that's going to get hit and hit and hit. And you just got to keep coming back. Like, there's a power mine uses this phrase a lot, and I've kind of adopted it as my own. But he used to say, it ain't who's best, it's who's left. And it's so true. It's like,
mm,
if you just keep going, you just keep persevering, a lot of the time it's just being there left, just the last one standing, where everyone else has just been pulled to the wayside. You haven't even got to be good. You just got to, like, persevere. You just got to keep going,
mm,
um,
mm,
and eventually you'll be good. Now, I don't have any particularly, my parents aren't massively athletic. My mum's got a slight history in athleticism. My dad doesn't. We're not. I'm not massively genetically gifted, but I was pretty smart and I could put things together, and I relied on that to be my skill set. I was never the best at
Hmm.
striker. I never had a massive natural talent for striking. Never had a massive natural talent for wrestling or grappling or jiu-jitsu or anything. But what I could do is I could put it all together better than most people.
Mm.
And I was quite cerebral, so I took to it quite well. But in terms of getting in the cage, like yeah, I did that. I did that to sort of face my own fears a lot of the time. I was
Mm.
always frightened, always scared. Um, but that's a point, right? Like there can be no courage without fear. So you've got to,
Mm. Mm.
in
Mm.
order to be courageous, there has to be fear involved. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's not courage, right? It's not courage if there's no fear. It's just doing, and it's easy. And it's cliche, but it is comfort zone stuff. It's like you're going to
Yeah.
put yourself out there in front of your comfort zone because MMA is an interesting one because a lot of people watch it and a lot of people know about it, but very few people do it. Very few people are actually in there doing it. And when you used to go to these fights, same old faces. There's the same old people knocking about because actually at that level, the level I got to, there's not many people doing it, you know,
No.
because it is
No.
pretty brutal. It's pretty hard, and it is frightening. It is scary. Um,
Mm.
and I suppose the one thing that instilled in me in some respects in terms of the professional aspect was once you've done that, things like taking a punt on business is who cares, because it instills a certain level of um, self belief that I think is hard to find anywhere else. I've got a slight stupidity slash arrogance that I can do anything. That I just kind of like I developed that, I suppose, naturally over a few years. Or I just thought, oh, I can do that. I could do anything. I can, when I first started getting into property, I was like, yeah, I can do like big commercial conversions, or I can go and speak to investors and developers, and have know nothing about it. I knew nothing about it, but I was like, well, I've read a couple of books. It's incompetence and unaware. So I was incompetent and unaware,
Yeah.
but I did do it, and then I started to understand it, and I was like, oh god, I am incompetent. Oh my god, I am unaware. But after a while, you go up the curve again, and you become
Yeah.
incompetent and aware, and eventually you become competent and I think it's competent and unaware. So you're unaware of how good you are at something. And I've
Yeah.
gone through that whole phase in fitness, but I also to some level, and I didn't quite get there because I came out of it pretty quick and I didn't persevere with some things, but. It's that thing as well. I think if you're going to get into something like that, you can just keep going. And I
Yeah.
remember being sat at a table talking to this local guy who owned like tons of property locally, and I was trying to essentially buy this property off him for God knows how many million. I haven't got millions. I haven't got anything. I didn't even know what I was going to do with it. But I'd somehow got in front of this guy, and we were having a conversation. We were getting on well because what I can do is I can talk to people and I communicate on their level, and that's something
Mm.
that fitness teaches you very early because you have to be like a social chameleon. You have to speak to Mavis who's 75, and you've got to speak to Danny who's 20 21 and wants to like pack on muscle so he can meet loads of girls, and you've got to speak to Doris who's 70 and just wants to be able to climb the stairs and get up in the morning without
Mm.
aches and pains, and everything in between that those demographics, you've kind of got to be able to communicate with in order to keep them coming back to your gym or keep them as customers and clients. So I guess
Mm.
that was where I got that from, if that makes sense.
And I think
Yeah,
so.
and
The comfort zone thing is I love talking about comfort zone, and that's I guess we're falling back into my previous podcast now because that's the stuff I used to love. I love getting into breaking out of your comfort zone and how you develop throughout that. But I think we're getting back to the kind of dad thing and strength training and men, which is the theme of this podcast really. I think it's interesting as well, the weight training. When you're in a gym, and you're facing a big strong personal trainer, or a person who's like going to help you in your fitness goals, you're in a vulnerable position. And to some extent, when you're starting out MMA, like you said, you're the hammer or the nail. When you're the nail, you're in a vulnerable position. And having being in a vulnerable position and having seeing some success through that, I think that is a very special experience for, especially for men, but I guess for everyone, actually, for women as well. But it's a thing that it doesn't come without you, like you said, without fear, there's no courage, and I think it doesn't come without you pushing yourself to that point. But what is it that, in your experience, that is stopping men to do that? Like, I guess nowadays it feels like a lot of men could benefit from, the strong dad movement, even if they haven't got kids with special needs. That a lot of men are struggling, and a lot of men are feeling alone, feeling vulnerable. What is it, in your opinion, that's stopping them from getting that?
I think probably comparison and ego mixed in together. So comparison
Mm,
is, what is it, the thief of joy, they say. So we tend to look at, social media is a nightmare. I think you tend to look at social media and think this is how every guy looks. This is what everyone's up to. They're all successful, they're all doing amazing things, having amazing lives. And I'm sort of starting again, or I'm going from scratch, or I'm not where I wanted to be in life, or my life took a bit of a sideswipe turn. And that gets a lot of men down. Certainly one of the reasons I fell to my lowest point was that. Um, and I think it really comes down to that inability to ask for help, to be vulnerable in the moment and say, I don't know what I'm doing,
mm,
which actually, coming back to some of my professional life, when I know we're not going down that road, but it's probably what I could have done with as well, was just saying, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I really appreciate just reaching out to someone, because
mm,
we always think the worst thing's going to happen. Where I think most of the time where I've done that in my life and in careers and stuff, blokes have been more than happy to help. Like, they've been really like welcoming. It's like, oh, thinking of doing this, but I wouldn't know where to start. They're like, well, I'll talk you through it. I'll help you, no problem. You know, we don't
mm,
ask for help,
mm,
right? We don't reach out.
mm,
So it becomes difficult, and then you get stuck in a cycle of, I'd like to do it, but I'm not quite willing to be vulnerable. So instead of accepting vulnerability, we turn it into a narrative. We'll say, I don't need help. Well, I don't really want to do that anyway. I didn't want to do that, or that's not for me, or you tell yourself you're, you know I don't know, big fat Dave, who's known for having the big belly and 5 pints and all that stuff. You might get up in the morning and look at yourself and go, oh, I hate what I see in the mirror. But your narrative is like, this is just, I'm all right with it. I'm okay with it. You know,
mm.
um, but deep down you're not, because that takes vulnerability, and that takes honesty with yourself, and also vulnerability and honesty with other people, and people that are close to you, that might even look up to you. Like kids, like your partners, like your friends. And that's hard. It's hard to
Mm.
say. I'm in a bad spot here, and I need help, and I need your support, and I need all these networks to lean on, because we think we need
Yeah.
to, or we're kind of conditioned maybe that. Or I think maybe not so much younger generation, which is good now, but certainly my age is like, stiff upper lip, go it alone, be stoic. Be stoic, just kind of
Mm.
accept it and move on. It's like, I don't know if that's the right thing to do in certain situations. What might be better is
Mm.
to yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with being stoic, but accept that you're going to need help. Accept that this is a situation and it's pretty crap, and you want to get out of it. Because as soon as you admit that it's a problem, then you can start making changes to get out of it. And that's all it takes for most people.
Yeah, I agree. I think the vulnerability things, we should dig on that. I think because for a lot of people nowadays, when you talk about men and vulnerability, it, they just resort to, you should be able to cry. Men should be able to cry, and that should be fine. And it's like, I feel like, just what you've just said, it's so much more complicated than that. It's not just about being able to cry and being able to sort of, show your sadness in the moment when you're at your lowest. It's everything else that comes alongside it. It's the being able to be embarrassed that you don't know. It's being able to like face up
Mm,
to that embarrassment and that be okay, and be able to show that show that whatever it is you're embarrassed about, to be able to show that to the world, and you know, trust that the world isn't going to come and crush you because of showing that. And I think that's where a lot of, like you said, ego as well, I think that comes into it as well. The comparison ego, I think it's a really nice way of putting it, because I don't know if it's something societally or culturally that we've grown up with, and because you know we're similar age. I'm a little bit older, but similar age in the UK sort of upbringing. But it does feel a lot like the sort of the culture is, you know, you should you should achieve this, you should achieve that. These are the things you should be looking to, you know, goals you should be setting for yourself. These are the things, you know, you should have the fast car and the whatever, the beautiful wife, all these things. It's not just comparison with the moments around it. It's like what we've set ourselves in goals in life, and we don't
mm,
always have the thing that the women have throughout their life from a very young age. They are, you know, acutely aware that they could be mothers, because they start having their periods, and they start, you know, they start like they know they have to take responsibility for body that can produce children from a very early age. And that responsibility, I think, is a part becomes a part of the sort of the psyche of how we can't help but become a part of the psyche. Men don't have that. We have just like the stories and the things we see that are ahead of us. And I don't know if that's like, I think the vulnerability is so much more complicated than people give it credit for. I don't know. What do you think to that? Like you kind of like the boys don't, big boys don't cry kind of thing. Like where are you at with that?
yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I think emotional intelligence is something that a lot of men lack, or they, well, they don't lack it. I don't think they just try and bury it, or think that that's they're gonna be judged upon that.
Mm,
In terms of the parenting thing, I get what you're saying with the mothers, but I do think the same is true with the fathers. Like, because that was one of the things I think I struggled with. I had a preconception about what fatherhood was going to be, of what I was going to, the type of dad I was going to
mm,
be, and the type of things I was going to do, and all these other narratives and concepts of how I was going to bring the kids up. And when we found out there were twin boys, I was like, oh, imagine that, taking them to taking them to fight training together, and they'll be the same size and the same weight, and they'll be great training partners, and they'll be able to push each other in school, and they'll be able to do all that. Yeah, all that stuff was taken away from me. All that stuff was taken away from me
mm,
as a father. I mean, forget what they have to go through, and my wife has to go through. But like, just from my perspective, I was like, all that's gone, and that's difficult. That's really difficult. That's when I had to
mm,
show my vulnerability and go, this is painful for me. This really is upsetting. This
mm,
is this is I cannot get over this. I'm going to need help to get over it. And it wasn't till I started showing that vulnerability that other people opened up to me, and actually, like, it made my life easier once I'd done it, because it was just a weight off my shoulder. Because all I needed to do was just articulate what I was feeling emotionally. You know what I mean? Like, just say, just
yeah,
just get it out there
yeah,
into the whether that be through social media, or counselling, or talking to mates, or probably a combination of everything. And not everyone's into social media, but
mm,
it's just a vehicle for putting that stuff out there. So I think, yeah, and I think in terms of, we do tend to have a very skewed idea of what success looks like.
mm,
I think depending on your cultural background, and your class background as well, I think has a lot to do with that as well. You know, it's difficult to define what success now for me looks very different to what it did 10 years ago, for example. I've completely reframed what a successful life will be for me, what it will look like. Um, and I'm moving
so what
towards
was that?
that.
What
And
was it 10 years ago? What is
classic
it now?
stuff,
What was what are the main differences?
big house, lots of money, nice cars, financially providing for the family, I suppose. lots of holidays, whatever it might be, traveling lots, doing all these various different things. Now for me, it's really more about happiness. I thought about all these material things but at no point I don't think 10 years ago going, how do you want to feel in the morning when you get up?
Mm.
You know, because I know loads of guys that on paper quotes are more successful than me. Good friends of mine, more success. Incredibly wealthy guys for their age. You know, nice big houses, families that love them, and they love their families as well. But they're a mess. They're a mess. Their relationships are poor. They aren't happy at work.
Mm.
They barely see the kids because they work so hard. When they do see the kids, they often struggle to connect, or they find it difficult. Um,
Mm.
are they winning? I don't know. It certainly doesn't look from it now. Now I'm looking from my end of the telescope. It doesn't look like they are. You know.
Mm.
Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm very lucky. Like, I was very fortunate. I did. We do live in a nice house. We do have all right cars. I mean, very very average cars, and all these other bits and pieces. We are relatively financially stable. Um, but we're not millionaires. We don't, it's not like we have like 6 holidays a year. We certainly, that to some respects, even if we wanted to, because of the boys' situation, that's taken away from you as well. So we can't just go on
Yeah.
holiday to a nice place with the boys. It's just they can't. They're not. They just doesn't sit with them. For us, it might be
No.
Norfolk in the summer, or you know. Camping, or something, even something as simple as that, as opposed to
Mm.
going to nice holidays to, I don't know, Dubai, wherever you want to go. Like, it's just not, you're not going to get them on a plane for 5-6 hours. We went to Centre Parks this summer, which was lovely. We
Mm.
went out of term time because boys get a different term because they're at special school. And there's loads of quotes, things to do at Centre Parks for the kids. Loads of things to do
Mm.
for kids.
Mhm.
We can access a lot of that stuff because of the autism. You can't access. You can't just take them rock climbing. You can't just take them to archery. They don't understand the concept of these things. So it was bike riding and swimming. That was it. It was a week of bike riding and swimming.
Yeah.
Now, I found loads of joy in that. I found loads of joy in loving that. But that could also be frustrating if you view it from the wrong end of the telescope. You'll be focusing on the things you can't do. You'll be focusing on,
Yeah.
I'd like to take my kids playing football. I'd like to take them to rugby tots. I'd like them to just take them on a play date because again, of the autism, they don't play with other kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very insular. They'll sort of just do their own thing. That's painful. That can be really painful. And there's a certain level
Yeah.
of, when you first come into contact with these, there's a certain level of shame, I think, in that, especially if you take them to a kid's party, they don't want to play with anyone, and they're sort of, everyone's on the trampoline. I remember this one vividly. Everyone's on the blow up, bouncy castle,
Bouncy castle.
and my kid Jude's around the back looking at the engine, blowing the thing up, because that to him is,
Yeah.
and I'm there going, oh, this is so embarrassing. This is so embarrassing, and I'm not, he's not embarrassed. I'm the one that's embarrassed. That's on me. I'm the person that's embarrassed.
No.
And that is, and then that feeling of
Yeah.
shame comes in, because like, you shouldn't be embarrassed because he doesn't know any better. And what are you embarrassed for? What do you care about what these people think? And then you start these back and forward narratives, and you start, that's when things like the anger creeps in. The anger management creeps in, because you're frustrated and you want to, you just want these things to be solved. And then someone comes over and says,
Mm.
oh, is he all right? It's like, you're like, oh, cough, you know, just worry about your own. And then, you start going through those bad
Yeah.
emotions,
Of course.
those bad things. And then that fight brain started to kick in for me, and I was like, this isn't good. This isn't, this
No.
isn't a healthy way to be. You can't be going to the school gates wanting someone to say something so you can punch them in the face. That's a very,
No.
very bad place to be mentally. But it got days. It did get there. It did get there for
Yeah.
me. I was like, I just want someone to do something. I wanted that because I just needed that, whatever it was, outlet or something. I just needed someone to go, what, like, what is it? Is it, and understand and empathize with the things that I was battling with in my own head.
I think you're, yeah, I'm spot on. I totally understand it. I mean, I think also, especially in your situation with the two kids with special needs, it's it's so alien as well to other people who haven't experienced that. So that, like, to know what to say or what to do, or how should I
Mm.
approach this? How should I, should I ask if he needs help? Should I, like, and probably most of the time it's coming from a good place when someone walks up to you and asks something. But
Yeah, of
like you
course.
said, like being able to empathize. I actually read your one. I was reading through your blog. I was doing my homework and reading through your blog. And there was a lovely one recently about, it was actually about, like, what if your I think it was, what if your partner doesn't support your fitness journey or something like that, but it was linked into this empathy part of, like, whatever it is that's coming in from the not supporting, it's probably, you know their issue more than it is your issue, right? Like, in terms of them
Yeah.
not supporting, or not, you not feeling their support. And I really resonated with me, that one, very, very heavily. Actually, I thought you hit it perfect. um, but it's also that kind of, like, in the moment of, like, stress and feeling yourself embarrassed or shame or frustration, I think is probably the better way of framing it. Like, that, how does that manifest out in and affect your ability to empathize? I think when men are feeling that vulnerability or that frustration or all those negative emotions, that, I don't know if it's, I don't, well, I say men, like, people. Let's keep it with people and then not upset anyone. When people feel those those frustrations, it can really trap you. It can really trap you within that, sort of feeling of being stuck. And what it doesn't do is, it doesn't make you feel like you need to be vulnerable or open up or ask for help. It makes you just feel more and more like that you're alone within that experience. And I wanted to kind of, like, saying all of that, I wanted to ask you about sort of loneliness and what your experience is of the men you deal with in Strong Dad, and the different, because you said about meeting different people in gyms and stuff. I'm assuming you've met a lot of different people who are probably feeling quite lonely. What's your sense of how the world is right now and how loneliness plays a part in that?
Um, it's loneliness. I think is the what they call it, the invisible epidemic or something, or it's the invisible. It's the elephant in the room, really. I think a lot of people suffer with loneliness big time. We are more connected and yet more disconnected than ever. And I think that's so true. I
Mm,
think that's so true. Like we have social media, we have WhatsApp, we have all these ways of connecting, but it's so easy to become lonely in that, because also I think
mm,
while there's more ways to connect, there's also more ways to put barriers up. Social media is a great one because things like Instagram. Very few people put on their Instagram, do you know what, I'm so lonely, I'm feeling really like life's a complete downer at the minute and everything's awful. And if you went through mine, so you go back through my Instagram, guarantee you there'll be nothing on there about how low I was feeling. You know, that you'll probably tell because there'll be big gaps in it. Because again, if you've got nothing positive to post, you just don't post anything at all. But it's true.
yeah.
And I think I see that a lot with. I see, yeah, right. I see that a lot with men, and I've been through that myself as well. I did isolate myself from my pals. I think one of the first triggers I think was they booked a holiday, not holiday, like a weekend away to watch football in Rome or something, AC Milan, and I'd said I was going. I said, and then right at the last minute, I just cancelled. I just said, no, I'm not going. And I made up some excuse. And a couple of the boys from the
Mm,
group contacted me personally because they knew. I think they just knew. They were like, no. They said, what's the matter? Like, because like they knew that I was always the guy that would be like 100%. I'm all in on that. I'm definitely going to be there. I'd be the
mm,
instigator of those sort of things. I'd be the guy going, yeah, definitely. Like let's get up to this sort of mischief. Let's go here. Let's do that. And
mm,
I was pulling back from it because I didn't because also I didn't want to have loneliness. Loneliness is I don't know what comes first, loneliness or the avoidance of conversation, because it's a death
mm,
spiral, right? Because you avoid conversation with people, because I didn't want to talk to anyone about the kids. I didn't want to talk to, one of the things I said to a very, very close mate of mine who, we still, we still, we do talk a lot, and we go for a drink when we can together, or coffee or whatever it might be. And we have a bit of like one-on-one time. Is He was the first one that I really articulated to. I said, I don't want anyone to ask me how the kids are, because every time they
mm,
do it, I feel like screaming back at them, still autistic, you know, move on. You know what I mean? It's like
mm,
it's
mm.
like saying, for me, it was like having your arm chopped off and going, "You still missing your arm?" You know, of course I'm still missing my arm.
Yeah.
It got chopped off. You know what I mean? But again, it was done out of a place of love. Like people were people just wanted to check in on me. But the way they were doing it, because they
Mm,
were probably in their own hearts as well, having a bit of a turmoil as well, because they were probably thinking, oh God, I need to talk to Brett about, I need to let him know that I know that his stuff is bad and that I'm here for him. But maybe they didn't know
mm,
how to articulate
mm,
it. But again, that's on me. That was a finger pointing back at them. But really, what it was three fingers pointing back at me, because I addressed my own
mm.
stuff. Right, and I didn't want to
Yeah.
I didn't want to talk to my closest mates. Then these are boys that I've known for years. I've known for years, and I was avoiding conversations with them because I thought, what do they know about my situation? I don't want to hear about how good their lives are. I don't want to hear about how annoying their kids are, how normal their lives are. I don't want, or how well they're doing at work,
Mm,
you know, because that's
mm,
painful. That's painful, because what am I going to say?
mm,
Again, comparison. What am I going to say? My ego's damaged. What am I? I don't want to be the loser of the group.
mm,
And then you isolate yourself, so you become lonely. And
mm.
what do they say when you're lonely? Oh, you really should get out and talk to people, but you don't want to talk to people because the ego
Yeah.
and it's a
I,
death spiral. It's
I
a death
think.
spiral.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I know we've talked previously in a phone call, and I sort of confided in you some of my struggles, and again, like it feels it's ironic with what you're talking about. It feels wrong to talk about struggles that aren't comparable to the amount of struggle that you've had, but again, I guess it's all relative, and I did get myself in a very dark headspace back 10, 12 years ago, and I was very lucky. I had some friends who basically pulled me out of it by just being there as friends. It was a sports group, but what I've realized is, and that's part of the reason that's inspired me to try and do something for men, podcast wise, is I see this loneliness a lot, and I see the fact that it's just dangerous because a lot of men don't no longer have the close friendships that they had. Women tend to have more close friendships than men. I don't have many close friendships anymore. I really don't. I don't have many friends. I have anyone that's listening to this that considers themselves a friend, I apologize, but I don't, in my day-to-day life in Oslo where I live, I
Yeah.
don't really have many friends, and I'm okay to admit that because it's taken me a long time to admit that. But I've moved country a lot. I've got people all over the world who I know love me and are great friends, but we're not on the phone barely ever. We don't meet up for a coffee. So I don't drink anymore. So that's another thing that's like I've put a spanner in my own engine by giving up drinking because that's a social thing. But it's difficult, and it's difficult because you've really got to feel like, okay, how do I get out of this? How do I talk to someone? Who do I talk to? If I don't have a group of mates, I think a lot of people imagine most guys having their group of buddies that they go down to the pub with and drink, and that's where they get their release and talk about their problems and whatever. And there's these kind of stereotypes, but I feel like that's an old-fashioned stereotype, and especially when you're when you're a parent or you've got like a busy life, busy job and things, it's just not realistic anymore. So I feel like that's where what you're doing and the strong dad thing, it really is super admirable, and I think it's a great concept. But I do wonder, like, what's the next thing? Like, how do you see that? Like, how would you encourage men or anybody to get themselves out and start pushing in the direction of like engaging with these things? Obviously there's things like strong dad out there, but like what are your best tips, tricks, advice for trying to get control of your own struggle? Because what you said before, when you were frustrated with your friends if they asked you how the kids are, or you're frustrated because, and you said it's three-point fingers pointing back at me because it's me not dealing with my stuff. I think that's true for so many people. But what is it that gets you able
Yeah,
to turn that around and say, okay, I'm looking at myself now?
I think it's acceptance. It does come back to being acceptance of vulnerability as well, and also I think taking time to sit in your own emotions as well, like rather than ignore
Mm,
the feelings that you're having, learning to accept them and learning to be kind to yourself in terms of say it's all right to feel like that. You just did it just then. You just said, oh, I can't feel like you feel because it's nothing like what you've been through. But at the end of the day, there's people out there digging through dustbin sites for their next meal. You can't tell me their situation's not worse than mine. They had
mm,
more trauma. There's child soldiers and all sorts. There's so many rotten things that go on in the world, but it doesn't take away from your situation. Your situation is your situation. Accept it. Accept that it's
mm,
unfair as well, and it's okay to say it's unfair. This is what I don't like about this whole, oh, you just need to man up. You just need to get on with it. You need to drive forward. It's like, yeah, but actually, what I went through was unfair, and I'm
mm,
okay to say that out loud. Like I have been hard done by, um, and
mm.
I will feel sorry for myself for a little bit. I will move on, of course, and with help of friends and family and all these other things that we're going to talk about now. I'll move on, but I accept that I was hard done by. I was,
Yeah.
my family, but me, I was something was taken from me through a vehicle of autism that no one could have done anything about. That's unfair,
Mm,
right? One of my businesses went to absolute crap overnight. Wiped out. You know, most of my income, and I was earning very very good money through for a pandemic that nobody saw coming. That's unfair. There just is, okay,
mm,
and it's the way the world works. But I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, stoic, everything happens for a reason, and da, da, da. No. That's unfair. No, I accept that, and
mm,
I have to move on from that. But I'm not going to not acknowledge that. I'm not going to acknowledge. It doesn't mean you have to wallow in it or you have to feel sorry for yourself for two. But it's okay to feel sorry for yourself for a little while. Give yourself that kindness in order to
yeah.
do that, because it's not until you've accepted it that
Mm,
you can then start to say, okay, well let's move on now. What's the next step? One of the big things to me was having counselling and going to see the doctor. I had to say I had to,
mm,
and actually it was my wife to help me do it. Take me to say, you are not right. You're not you you're not where you need to be. Um,
mm,
and that was really difficult for me, really difficult, because it was asking for help and it was admitting vulnerability. And it was my ego, because I'm the tough guy, right? I'm the cage fighter. You know, I don't feel pain and all this sort of stuff. Well, yeah, I bloody well do.
mm,
Just as much as everybody else, and
mm,
everybody else's situation is their situation. So, I've got guys I talk to, and they're like, and they're telling me stuff, and they're like, oh, I don't know what I'm complaining to you about. I know you've got it worse. Like, you don't need to validate anything. You don't need to like compare. This is not. It's a comparison game again.
mm,
You're comparing your thing to
mm,
mine, because I look at my. I said to you at the start, didn't I, about my PTSD? I look at my pals that did 2 tours of Afghan, and
Mm.
saw horrendous things, no doubt, you know. And I'm like, well, I've got PTSD, but I mean, he's really got PTSD. It's like, no, we both got PTSD, but
Yeah, yeah.
they're just different, like he's hurting just as much as I am. It's just, we're just hurting in different ways. But it doesn't mean that we don't both hurt. We both need to deal with it, in our own way. So the first thing I would say is just you are going to have to accept your pain. You are going to have to accept that something needs to be done about it, and um, hopefully, hopefully you'll have other people to help you along that way. Um, you might have to
Mm.
apologise to people. You might have to apologise to people that you've isolated. And that is difficult because you might have to go back
Yeah.
to people, back to friends, and go. You know what? I haven't called you in a while. Well, this is why I haven't called you because I was pissed off because your kids are fine and mine aren't. And that annoys me, mate. You know what I mean? Like your perfect life frustrates the hell out of me because that's what I wanted. I'm
Mm.
jealous of you. I'm jealous of that, and I can't. I find it hard to get my head around it. And if they're a good friend,
Yeah.
which I'm sure they will be, then they'll understand. It will kind of take them back a bit, and
Yeah.
it'll be an uncomfortable conversation, but it will understand, and then they'll help you get through it, and then they'll be there to get you back, and they'll be there if to point you in the direction of a counsellor. They'll be there to point you in the direction of some self help groups. They'll go to the gym with you. They'll do these other things. Exercise and fitness. I
Mm.
obviously think is always a good idea. I always, I do now
Yeah.
think self care is a good idea. What that looks like to you is very individual. I think some people like meditation, some people like stillness. For me, that's not really. I've tried it genuinely. Doesn't really do it for me. But like for a lot of people swear by it. I like to, if I'm really struggling, I
Mm.
just found that getting out in the morning and just doing some walks was really helpful. Just getting some fresh air. And I used to
Yeah.
I used to walk to this park out over me. I used to sit on a bench, and I used to sit there just for 10 minutes, just collect my thoughts, and then come back into the real world. So escape the madness for 10 minutes, back into the real world. I wasn't massively neglecting the family doing that. Just something I had to take that time to escape. You know. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think realizing that this whole thing is a journey and a process and not something that you're not suddenly gonna be all right in the morning. You know what I mean? There's not gonna be a magic bullet. It's gonna be stuff that you're gonna
Mm. Mm.
continue
Mm.
to work on and progress through. And you know I think that's a big part of it. A big part of it is accepting that it's a long process, that you have to do several different things. You have to start looking after yourself. You have to start the help. You have to start the self care. You might have to go and have some conversations with people. You might have to have some very awkward conversations and possibly even apologize for certain things. You've got to try and reintegrate yourself with some networks, which again is always
Mm.
awkward. But let's just accept it's awkward on the front end, and let's just try and do it, because the alternative is always going to be worse. The alternative is always going to be worse. The alternative is you will keep spiraling down that cycle of loneliness and everything is it's a slow spiral. It's a boiling of the frog,
Mm.
right? So you won't suddenly find yourself being lonely. You'll just go boom, 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 and then one day you just wake up and you're like, God, I'm so alone. I'm so alone. But
Mm.
you can
Mm.
break that
Mm.
cycle as well. You can come back from that. And coming back from that isn't a sudden jump up the ladder. It's a slow flywheel. You've got to got a tiny little thing every day, a tiny little step every day, one little thing every day that just kind of pushes you more towards getting back to the person you either used to be or that you want to be.
It's incremental steps on that journey, right? I mean, there's a great book, Atomic Habits. I'm sure you've read it. It's like a great book about
Yeah,
like
yeah.
building small, tiny habits that change, and the end result is massive. But these tiny things you do on a day-to-day basis, just changing. I love that book, and I think when you like MMA, or I'm doing jujitsu, which is like the baby version, but I love jujitsu, and it's like
No, I love
small
jiu-jitsu. It's
these
good.
small
Yeah.
mo these small moments of like just repetitive understanding, just being completely uncomfortable, and getting squashed and squashed and squashed, and then one day you're suddenly like, oh, I got it, like I got my knee in, and like now I'm getting out, kind of thing. Those like moments, and you see just
Mm.
it's tiny incremental improvements. There's two things I wanted
You're the nail at the
to talk
moment,
actually.
Nick.
Yeah,
With
yeah,
jiu-jitsu, mate.
exactly.
With
I'm the nail, but
jiu-jitsu,
I've
jiu-jitsu
been the nail
really
for a long
mirrors.
time
Yeah,
now.
it's fine, and you will be for a long time. Jiu-jitsu is a really interesting one, because a lot of martial arts, you hear about, kids being black belts, and think, Dave's a black belt. You look at Dave, you think you're some out of shape old man. Like if you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu, you've stayed the course, right? You've stayed the course, and
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
progress, and again, you might not be the best black belt in the world, but you've had to really kind of work at it, and it's when you get to black belt, you suddenly become the hammer to some degree, or you're
yeah,
certainly less of a nail. But in jiu-jitsu,
yeah,
as a what, that's why most people, I think the stats are most people quit at blue belt because it's or
yeah,
most
yeah,
people quit at purple, but I'm not sure which it is. But like they get to that stage and it's like they stop because the eyes down the journey is like, oh my god, if it took me to get to blue belt, then bloody hell, then what's
yeah,
the next phase going to be? What's the next like whack going to be? And I get that.
yeah.
I get that. And I've seen people, right? I've seen people that I used to, no disrespect to them, it's just the truth. I used to smash, absolutely just take the mick with them on the mat. They're black belts now. And I bet you any money if I put my gi
Yeah,
back on, they tear shreds off me, you know? And all they did, because they weren't athletic, they weren't particularly athletic
yeah,
or gifted, but all they did is they just didn't stop. It ain't who's best, it's who's left. That's all they did,
yeah.
you know?
It's a very David
And there's something in
Goggins
that.
thing as well, right? The getting out there and doing it, and because no one else is. There's a YouTuber, Mark Lewis, who I really like, who I interviewed on my other podcast, and he mirrored that as well. He was like out late at night running because no one else is, and he was kind of loving that being the one left is the one out who's running at night time because no one else is. I do like that stuff. But
Mm,
the other thing I wanted to acknowledge was the pain, accepting your pain, and I think we've touched on it a few times. Comparison, but something we haven't mentioned is a lot of men struggle as well. People don't talk about it enough, but like a lot of men struggle. Couples struggle to have kids. Couples struggle with just being able to make kids, and also there's a lot of lost pregnancies and challenges within pregnancies. Like you said, you're in hospital for like, on and off for 9 months, and thankfully you managed to get the kids through in the end. But it was like those sorts of struggles are very often, well, from the guy's point of view, well, my God, she is suffering so bad. She's the one that's going through all of these challenges. It's so much more, and it is worse, obviously, for the women because they've got these, they've got to carry the kids, and they've got to, their body has to like do all this crazy stuff. But I do think there's a missing element there of like we do that as well. We kind of like, oh, these she's the one that's suffering, so I really can't complain. And actually, I've seen it, and I've seen it my firsthand. Is not being able to acknowledge that it is really tough to lose a pregnancy, and not being able to talk about that to
mm,
anyone, and just feeling like I shouldn't complain. That nearly burnt me up because I was devastated. And I really was devastated. I was trying to hold the relationship together. I felt like I was trying to hold the relationship together. I was trying to put all the good energy in it, and I was felt like I was just failing on every single count. So I think it also, that comparison thing was also comparing with your partner. It's okay as well for you to be in pain and suffering, and acknowledge that. And it's okay that things are not fair for you as well, even if they're more not fair for your partner or whatever. I
mm.
think that's also something that's worth acknowledging.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have experienced that in the Strong Dad group several times. Um, Obviously, I've never experienced it
Yeah,
personally myself, but I've seen that level of heartache from dads that have lost, pregnancies, and sometimes multiple pregnancies as well. Which I mean, I
yeah,
don't know I can't. Of course, I can empathise, but I'll never have walked that. I'll never have walked that mile. So I can only imagine how
Mm,
difficult that is. Um, and yeah, I see a lot of them putting on quotes brave face and just kind of getting on with it. But again, sometimes um, the difficult thing there, I suppose, is that you are rightly supposed to be the support for your partner, wife, girlfriend, whatever. But you also need to find your own support network. If she doesn't have the bandwidth for that,
yeah,
then you you better go out and find another support network for it. Maybe it'll be family,
yeah,
maybe it'll be someone close to you, a friend or something. But communicating that effectively is a big thing. Um, and I would say to other guys, listen, look out for the telltale signs as well, because I saw it in a guy. I saw it in a guy that I was training with, um, and I knew so. I didn't know anything about his wife being pregnant or anything, but I knew something weren't right. I just knew something weren't right, and I he was training one day. I said, let's go and grab a coffee. And he said, yeah, I'd like that actually. And I knew he wanted to say something. I just knew. So I said, all right,
mm,
tomorrow morning or whatever. I was like, yeah, we want to grab a coffee. And then he told me, he said they'd lost their baby, and it was clearly eating the guy up, and
mm, mm,
he had tears coming down his face when we sat outside in a coffee shop having a coffee. All he needed was a little bit of vent, and for someone to say, not that it's going to be all right, because I never say that. I never say it's going to be all right, because
no,
it isn't all right. But what I do say is, I said, I'm not going to say it's all right, but I'm going to say we'll get through it together, or like we
yeah,
will find a way to move
yeah,
to move through it. Like, it's something I said to my wife as well when she was having the surgery. She said, "Tell me everything's going to be all right," and I can't say that. It's not. I find
mm,
it. I
mm,
find
mm,
it not
mm,
right. Like, ethically, I don't think it's right. Morally, it's not right to say that, because I don't know that everything's going to be all right. But
yeah,
what I do know is, whatever happens, is we will move past it or through it, or we will work to get over it, so to speak, or move, whatever the
mm,
terminology might
yeah.
be at the time. But I think that's a key point. So yeah.
It's it's great advice, and I think that it's that moment of like finding the person to talk to at the right time as well. But anyone listening that's going through it, I mean, I can say as well, one thing that's pretty shitty about that situation as well is you become, if you lose a pregnancy, we lost two, and it was like, it just became like sex became, we're gonna make a baby now, because it was like, this didn't work, next now we have to make a baby, and it was no love, there was no intimacy, it was no kind of like passionate sex, it was just like, okay, I'm ovulating now, like we're making a baby kind of, and it became, so I just became a tool to try to get pregnant again, to get through this horrible mess that was going on in both of our brains.
Mm,
And and that makes you feel even more lonely, because then you feel like, well, I'm just a tool in this relationship. I'm just, I'm not even a loved partner. It kind of almost irrelevant in this situation. It's like I'm just the tool to get the pregnancy going again. And of course, I've talked to my wife about this now, and of course she didn't mean it to be like that, but it was like those sorts of things go like eat you up in your head as well while you're going through it. And that doesn't help with you feeling lonely and and helpless, I guess.
mm,
So yeah, definitely the good advice is to, it's always good advice, right? Talk to someone, and trust that someone is going to take you seriously and is going to want the best for you, right? I mean, I think that's something which a lot of men are not good at doing, is trusting that it's going to be, that they're going to be taken seriously, and that they're going to be listened to. Okay.
agreed.
Brett, I wanted to wrap up with a little bit of positivity here, because I know that you're a positive guy, and you've got a lovely blog. Actually, I definitely recommend. I'm not a big blog reader actually, but I was reading through your blog. I was like, this is quite nice actually to sit and read. But I don't
Yeah, the
usually read
written
blogs
words.
ever. I
Yeah,
watch
I'm
video.
about 20 years too late to blogging, but it's
Yeah,
I'm late.
yeah.
I'm late to the
I'm
party
more
on
of
most things. So it's
watching
fine.
videos.
Yeah, I'll get
I
into that. I'll
usually
get into
watching
that in 10
videos, so
years. I'll be on YouTube in 10 years' time when everyone else is doing holograms or something.
Yeah, something like that. But no, anyway, so I definitely recommend people to go there. But I can see that you're positive, and you're also positive on things which, like, hey, you did a thing on AI as well. It can be disruptive to your business, but you're like, no, go out, do that AI stuff, like work out a program. It clearly didn't phase you. There's clearly still work and benefit that you can bring as an individual to clients and customers and things. So it's like you were kind of like, no, go for it. It's like this could be a good
Mm.
thing. I'm wondering, like, any advice, like, let's finish up with some positive mindset stuff. Like, how do you get yourself in a positive mindset? How do you advise people to try what, like, taking into account everything we've talked about in terms of dragging yourself out of a hole and getting yourself help and things? What do you say is like your best advice for kind of like attaining and sustaining a positive mindset?
Just just try and enjoy the little things every day, and reflect on what is good in your life. And I found that hard until things got very difficult. But actually, if you could do that, it does make a difference. And also I think that the biggest sort of, and this is going to sound so cliche and so almost a bit hippy dippy, and it's not me at all. But like, just try and help other people, because that'll give you happiness. Whether it doesn't even need to be financial. It will just make you happy. We are social creatures, and we
Mm,
like working in
mm,
social groups. And if you've got something to help and put out there and give, then just give it, and give it away for free. You don't have to
mm.
charge for everything. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be a big money making thing. It can just be, it can be as much as a, a compliment to a mate, or a pat on the back for someone, and or just doing something kind for someone else. It does, those little things make a difference, and they really make you feel good about yourself as well. Um,
Mm,
I think at my worst as a person was when I'd taken a few hits, and I felt like I wanted the world to pay me back. I wanted the world to owe me something. Um, and now I've gone the other way. I'm a lot happier. But I don't expect anything off anyone, in the nicest possible way. Like, I don't, I give, not
mm,
not meaning to receive, but naturally you do when you give. You tend to get twice back anyway. Um, and just know that,
mm.
like, if you just go out there and ask for help, the everything in your head is always worse than what it is. Like, especially in terms of reaching out for help, you always think this is going to be awkward. You always think it's going to be difficult. You always think you're going to get rejection, and you're not. Like, most people, I think, in this world, and it's a value I hold more now, I think, than ever. Most people in this world are good people, and they want to do good things to and they want to do right by people, and they want to do right by you. So keep that in your keep that in your back pocket all the time. Like,
Mm.
there's always going to be some dickheads out there, but they'll be swamped by the good people. And just reach out to them, stick around with them, and you'll be happy, you'll be fulfilled, and yeah, you can just, if you're not feeling at rock bottom, then fantastic, good luck to you. But but when you are, then you can get out of that place as well. And then when you're out of it,
Mm.
and someone that is in that place that you were once, give them some strategies and give them some help, and get them out of it too.
Yeah,
You'll feel all the better for it.
that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love it. And the kindness to yourself and kindness to others is you know it's it seems so obvious, but it's something to work with, work for. Brett, thank you so much for spending the time talking to me. I really, really appreciate you, and I appreciate everything you're doing. Where can people find you? Where do you want to, what do you want to promote? What do you want to know about? To my enormous audience, it's going to be millions of people, so it is your
Superb.
opportunity.
You can, well, yeah, I mean, look, you've mentioned it before, but you can go on my website, brettsizeland.com, and you can read the blog there, which has a lot of sort of personal stuff, but also some practical fitness and strength stuff as well. Other than that, like just hit me up on Instagram, or just again just contact me through the website. I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone that wants to reach out, or if I can help in any way, fitness or non-fitness or whatever it is you want to talk to me about, then yeah, I'm always here. That's it, mate. I'm
Great,
good.
Brett. Listen, I really hope we stay in touch, and I super appreciate as a human being, and I wish you all the very best. And yeah, I hope we connect again sometime.
Cheers, Nick. Yeah, good talking to you, mate. Take care.